With the rise of Ebola cases in the U.S., hospitals like the East Alabama Medical Center in Opelika are taking the extra mile, making sure they're Ebola ready. Ebola signs are what you can see around the East Alabama Medical Center.
We have signs at all of our entrances asking, stop and read this. Have you traveled to West Africa within the last month? And do they have those symptoms? And if so, we're directing them all into our emergency room entrance.
The signs are just one measure the EAMC uses for Ebola prep. Another is this, an evaluation station built in front of the hospital's emergency room. New because of Ebola. Now no one can get inside the ER without stopping here first.
We have a screening person outside 24 hours a day, so that people come, the screening person asks those questions, and they do not have entrance unless those questions are asked.
One thing you may not see is the hospital's Ebola Preparedness Committee and Ebola hotline. Future patients can be assessed for Ebola right over the phone without stepping foot inside the hospital. A call to 334-528-EBOLA connects potentially infected people with the EAMC.
The reason for that is so that we can be aware and we can be prepared before these patients were to enter our facility.
The financial costs to prepare for the deadly disease Ebola may not be as pricey as you think. John Atkinson with the EAMC says Ebola prep has seemingly cost the hospital so far around $5,000 to $10,000.
In the grand scheme of things, pretty nominal in order to prepare for this. We still have to prepare for it, so the cost is really a second-hand thought there.
Bailey says there's a slim chance an Ebola patient could ever come to the hospital, but if the unlikely does occur, the hospital is ready. Now, another thing you won't see inside the hospital is all the training that goes into Ebola preparations. Tomorrow, I'll be giving you a closer look into what the hospital does if there's an Ebola patient. For WLTZ First News, I'm Dorothy Sherman. It all starts in front of the emergency room. A patient shows up to the ER and screens positive for Ebola. But instead of the emergency room, the patient goes to this. 2 tents connected by a plastic sheet.
One tent is where the actual patient is and where the direct patient caregiver is. The other tent is an observation tent so that they could actually look at the patient and communicate them through a barrier without becoming contaminated.
After further evaluation, nurses take the patient to the hospital's special Ebola unit. The unit is designed specifically for Ebola patients and has one way in and one way out.
That's just defining what we can consider clean and dirty, making sure that we have a path that people come in correctly and leave correctly to make sure that we minimize the contamination.
To cut back on contamination, the doctors and the nurses can actually communicate with the Ebola patient through this monitor that's located right outside the Ebola unit. The EAMC's Ebola response team is partly comprised of volunteer nurses. One's like CECIL HART, who's a registered nurse at the hospital, but today one of 2 nurses directly working with the mock Ebola patient.
As a registered nurse, we care about patients, and this gives us an opportunity to continue that care to maybe a patient we would never see in our lifetime otherwise.
Before ever assisting the patient, each nurse suits up in their own protective gear.
There are 2 nurses at all time who are going to be putting on all of the PPE, the personal protective equipment. Make sure that there are no holes in the coverall and your gloves. You're going to have double gloves on at all time. You're going to not only have on a full bodysuit that covers from the head all the way down to the toes, you're also going to put a gown on top of that.
And just as the nurses practice putting on the gear, they also practice taking it off.
We have specific steps that we're training for. We're practicing as far as making sure we're taking off the most contaminated things and slowly becoming less and less contaminated till we're able to come out of the room.
If it were real, the hospital would send specimens to the CDC for Ebola confirmation while the patient stays in the unit. But for now, it's just a drill, a practice for the team to stay prepared. For WLTZ First News, I'm Dorothy Sherman.